Good evening, and welcome to the Board of Estimate and Taxation Budget Committee's fiscal year 2025-2026 budget presentations and public hearing. I am Leslie Tarkington, the chair, and on my left are Leslie Moriarty and Harry Fisher, and on my right, David Weisbrod. Thank you for your interest in the Town of Greenwich fiscal year 2025-2026 budget and for attending this evening's meeting in person or by watching the presentations and public hearing on Greenwich Community Television channels 24, 79, or YouTube. Thank you to the GCTV team, Horst Tebbe and Don Conway. And so now I'll comment on a few housekeeping items. We have here tonight our Fire Marshal, Chris Froelich, and Police Officer Ryan Carino, and they're in the building with us, and there's another officer outside. And our fire marshal requests that there be no standing in this room. Additional seating, if we, get to capacity, is in the cone room on the second floor. And the meeting is live streamed in the cone room, so if you need to be there, you can. And if you are here for pickleball, please read the memo on the sign on the table, and there's some memos over there. The BET has funded pickleball, both the pickleball courts at the Cohen Old Greenwich Civic Center, as well as the lighting. And the Parks and Rec Department are working with the pickleball people to make sure that the right dimensions and all the other issues that changed in 2024. Tonight's meeting will begin with the town presentation, followed by the Board of Education schools presentation, and then the public hearing. For the public hearing, speakers will be called on in the order they signed to speak. Each speaker has a maximum of 3 minutes. Comments received by completing the form linked to the agenda will be posted on the Budget Committee webpage. The department meeting process begins next Tuesday, February 4th. Meeting dates are provided in the BET calendar section of the town website, as well as the budget schedule section with suggested department meeting dates. Fiscal year 26 budget meeting days and time schedules are approximate and subject to change due to changes in department availability or to length of department reviews, and also adjusted for snow days when the town hall is closed. These meetings are also televised live by GCTV. The committee welcomes your attendance in the town hall meeting room or GCTV for these meetings. We meet 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. for 6 department meeting days, a consolidation day, and a budget decision day on March 4, which are 8 days in total. The Budget Committee decision is followed by 2 BET public hearings on March 26, which is for the schools, and another public hearing on March 27th, which is the Town of Greenwich non-schools. And then the final BET decision day on April 1st. So at this point, the Budget Committee welcomes our first selectman, Fred Camillo, to present the town's fiscal year 2026 operating and capital budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to Town Hall for this budget presentation. Before I get going, I would like to thank all of the department heads who have worked on this with their teams. It's a 12-month endeavor. It's not just a few months. I also want to thank our new town administrator and COO, Kate Bush, who, it's hard to believe, has only been here a few months, has hit the ground running. And coming on the heels of Ben Branyan, it's been a perfect transition, so town has been really blessed to have you here. And of course, Wendy Zhao, who put this together, is always instrumental in everything that goes on in the Office of First Selectman, so we thank Wendy. And the BET, the Budget Committee, thank you so much for, you too work 12 months a year on this, and it's truly appreciated. And the RTM, especially the RTM committees that deal with the budget, it's greatly appreciated. Those people do it for free, and so it's one of those things that makes Greenwich Greenwich. And the Board of Education will follow after this, but I want to thank the Board of Education for putting in all of their work. It's much appreciated. And we'll get going. This is the outline of the presentation. You have the BET guidelines, the capital budget, the operating budget, head count, and summary. Okay, the guideline highlights. We continue programming and services, capital projects at $50 million for fiscal year '20, $350 through '26 to '30. The mill rate increase is, the guideline is 3.95. We almost hit it. Estimated budget increases without benefits, 2.96 for the BOE, 2.93 for the town. And I believe, what we were saying before, I believe this is the first time we were a little bit south, north of it, but it was a tough year, but we expect it'll come down a little bit more. General overview, governed by Article 2, Section 21B of the Town Charter, the first selectman shall develop goals and objectives and establish priorities for spending for the ensuing fiscal year. Establish priorities with respect to recommended capital spending for all town agencies, and develop a long-range capital spending plan. This is a revitalized CIP process. About 5 years ago, we sat down, my administration, and we thought that the 15-year one was a little bit cumbersome and really hard to pin down on anything. It didn't provide that level of certainty. We found that the 5-year capital has really worked much better. And that said, things change. We have to reprioritize all the time. When there's something that fails a building, things have to get reprioritized. So it's an ongoing process, but we feel that this 5-year plan, certainly with a focus on year one, those 4 out years do really help. The capital plan reflects the first selectman's priorities over the next 5 years. Prior capital plans have helped develop the proposed long-range capital spending plans that you see tonight. This just shows, this graph, $400 million over the next 5 years. You can see that the town is in green and the Board of Ed is in blue. And it just shows you, if you look at this, how difficult it is to meet the guidelines. And the guidelines are fair, but when you have one project that's $50 million, right, things that you may wanted to get done has to be rearranged a little bit. But we kind of measure what we like to have with what we need to have, and I think this reflects that. Fiscal year '26 capital budget. The plan includes annual investments in the town's infrastructure. Here's a few highlights. Annual paving is $3.5 million. Highway maintenance, $2 million. Stormwater drainage, $750. This is something that you're going to see for the rest of our lives. It's where flood mitigation is something that's present in every town. Greenwich is no exception. So each year, you'll see a line item there. The public safety complex garage coating is $1.35 million. That building's about 20 years old, and so that has to protect hundreds of thousands of dollars in vehicles. Also, the forensics garage is underneath that. That area needs to stay dry, so that is coming due. GFD, Fire Department breathing apparatus, $1.2 million. The leaf blowers, this is something that the RTM passed last year, and so we have to comply with it. And that $600,000, $400,000 is going to be earmarked for the Parks and Recreation Department, and $200,000 to DPW. Replacement of the town's telephone system, $550, and multiple ongoing ADA compliance projects. Everything we do now is going to be ADA compliant, but also inclusive. It's not something only that we have to do, it's something that we want to do. School renovation projects, you see JC's there for $2.6 million, Ham Ave, $2 million, and Riverside School this year is $2 million, to be followed by $48 million next year. The Shore Road sidewalk, this is a feel-good story. I see Kristen over there. I want to thank you, and I don't know if Maggie Bound is in the room, but a couple of years ago, Maggie had reached out to me about getting a sidewalk there, and I just explained to her that it's a great idea, but usually neighbors end up fighting over it at the end of the day. And Maggie was undeterred, and she enlisted the help of Kristen and an army of residents over there in OG. And they had many meetings and meet and greets and walks. I participated in several of them. And make a long story short, they got the 75% threshold that DPW put out there, so they went forward. And if you ever go through OG in the morning, you'll see lots of parents walking to school or riding their bikes with their kids, and they're utilizing that sidewalk. And so that was $750 in phase one. So fiscal year 26, we have $1.25 for phase two. And again, this is something we encourage people to have active lifestyles, whether it's hiking, biking, just walking around your neighborhoods, but we want you to do so safely. And so that's why you see a lot of emphasis in the administration on pedestrian and public safety, and this is part of it. But we had really great willing participants over there in OG, so hats off to them. This is, again, I mentioned before, the public safety complex garage coating, $1.3 million. Again, this is at the end of its useful life. We have the replacement of the deteriorated metal exterior stairwell. Again, underneath this garage, underneath this surface, is hundreds of thousands of dollars in public safety vehicles, as well as a forensics garage. So that area absolutely needs to stay dry. Also, we have just, I forgot to mention, there was a couple other projects where maintenance is going to be really important over the replacement of the drain culvert over at Deerfield Drive and Grove Lane is one. The library parking garage is another. The Board of Ed's parking lot is another. So these things have to be maintained. Otherwise, you're going to wait too long, and it's going to cost us a lot more money. Thanks. I put this one in here because this is the one that's one of the more frustrating ones for me. There's probably people in this room that were not here when I first put this in 2020. Roger Sherman Baldwin Park has the teen center, and the teen center is between the park and a garage that houses a Parks and Rec operation. And that is arguably some of the most expensive land, not only in Greenwich, probably, but in the country. And we're parking trucks there and changing oil. So the idea, we put out an RFP several years ago. That, I wish I had a better rendering of that, but if you look at where that green space is there, right near where the Island Beach boats are, that shows you what it could look like, right? And there's trails there, there's more green space. It's just a beautiful, beautiful rendering of what could be. This waterfront property is underutilized. And what's holding this up? We have to relocate the Parks and Rec operation. And Joe Siciliano, director's over there, has been working really hard for 5 years. And we've finally settled on the transfer station, or if you were born and raised here, the dump, which has to be configured anyway. Going back into the 1980s, they were talking about redoing the transfer station for lots of reasons. But that's a big price tag. And so if we can get that funded, what I can tell you is the $10 million that's slated here for construction of relocation of the Parks building and a redesign of the park, we've had 3 foundations already, 3. And we reached out to 2, one reached out to us that wants to help pay for this. But we can't get to this until we get the funding for the reconfiguration of the transfer station. I'll get to this, possibly looking into grants and help from the federal government in a little bit. But we're going to really try our best to try and get money over there for that, because if you keep looking at, what a shame to be in a town that's on the waterfront, and yet you're really low boys and pickup trucks there, and and I had a low boy and I had a pickup truck for most of my life, and nothing against that, but you don't want them parked on the water. So I'm going to continue to push this, and hopefully we'll find some funding to do that relocation. Greenwich Cove channel dredging, $1.5 million. The silt decreases the average depths about 4.5 feet at low tide. Removal and disposal of approximately 20,560 cubic yards of sediment. The shoreline is really one of our greatest assets, and we have to keep up with it. And there's a lot of permits that are going to be expiring soon, and we're going to have to reapply for them. Makes the cost of this considerably more expensive. So, as the old commercial, whoever is old enough to remember, used to say, you could pay me now or you could pay me later. Let's get this done. The Wallace Center interior upgrade, another feel-good. The estate of Mary Louise Wallace donated $1.32 million for the rehabilitation of the ground and first floor restrooms, activity rooms, administrative offices, outside the ADA access ramp, and the new kitchen and dining room this year. And then in 25 to 27, $2.89 million for the remaining interior renovation and infrastructure upgrades, including a chiller replacement. I don't know if people have been in that new cafe, but it's beautiful. Well, several of us have been in there. They love it. And that building, which is the old town hall, which used to have a jail in it, it used to have a court in there. I know a few people that actually were attorneys that worked in that building. But I'm not old enough to have been in either one of them, so don't disabuse you of any thoughts there. But it really is a historic building. The outside looks beautiful. The inside's been hurting for years, so it's starting to get much better. God bless you. And another bit of good news here is I was in a meeting a few weeks ago, and there will be another significant donation coming for a little bit more of the interior and the outside courtyard, so people can go out there and utilize it and eat and maybe listen to lectures. So lots of good news on the way there, and we thank the estate of Mary Louise Wallace and the soon-to-be to the family that's going to be donating more money to really, again, enhance that what is a beautiful landmark in Greenwich. JC Elementary School, $1 million for the front entrance ADA compliance and inclusion, and then 2.61 for the funding to renovate the current undersized cafeteria. And if you've been in that cafeteria, it's small, and it's time. So another beautiful school that needs a little bit of work there. Ham Ave parking lot, $2 million for the repair of the parking structure, including the upper level and lower level garage, which includes topping slab and membrane removal and replacement. Riverside, you'll see $2 million this year for A&E work, architectural and engineering, and then the big one, $48 million for construction in fiscal year 27. Apologize. And this just shows the capital pressure on the budget. Notice the debt service. The decision to fund projects, which we have to do, has a direct impact to the operating budgets of the future. Now we go on to the operating budget. You see town services there, 3.11. Dr. Jones will get to the education after that. Total 4.22 change. Capital tax levy, we added $3 million. And then if you look at the bottom, 4.33% change. They come very close to the guidelines, just a little bit above, but I'm sure my friends to my right are going to work on that. Charter language, annual budget. Governed by Article 2, Section 21B of the Town Charter, the First Selectman shall review all proposed budgets received and shall make such revisions and modifications in such proposed budgets as the First Selectman deems necessary or appropriate, except for the operations of the budget submitted by the Board of Ed. We still get emails all the time yelling at me for spending too much or too little on the Board of Ed. So as much as I like Dr. Jones, I'm going to push that off to you. FY budget 26 budget summary, town services. So you look at general government, 3.87. Those increases come from finance for increased banking fees and software rental, and from IT for increased cybersecurity costs. Fire increases due to the overtime, which is related to the shifting of the fire department floater positions into a much-needed operational and support role while respecting the zero headcount increase. And then go down the rest. Fleet, you see a little bit of a decrease there. That's because of the lower price of gasoline. The rest of the lines there, thank you to those departments, they were fairly low. And then finally, 3.11 change. These are the fixed charges. So if you look at healthcare at the top line there, after this budget was submitted, we got news that it's going up a little bit. So that's going to be 11, change of 11% there. You look at the second line, the 20.79% change there. The good news is that more revenue coming in. Bad news is if you're an employee, you're paying a little bit more for that money. But certainly those benefits are still very, very good compared to most. Pension contribution decrease is due to a decrease in the actuarially determined funding level. And going, now, if you look at Nathaniel Witherell in the school lunch there, you see a big number there, 2.7. I don't have all the details for the Board of Ed. They'll talk to that. I did speak with Nathaniel Witherell again today about this, and it really wasn't too much on their end, but they, as of January 31st, they're going to be revamping their food service delivery, and they're going to have an anticipated weekly decrease of savings of $6,000 a week. So good for them, and hats off to John Mastronardi and the group there for working on that. And that total is 4.09%. Budget summary, revenue, use of fund balance, 0, and you look at all the rest of it, and there, the main thing there that everybody's looking at is the last one, right? 4.33% change. Oh, and also, just to know, after the submission of this budget, Planning and Zoning let us know that due to an increase in fees, that we should be getting another $250,000 that will show up later in this, to the good. Headcount. Okay. Basically, the long and short of it is we're adding 0.6, not even one full-time employee. We're taking 2 part-time positions, planning and zoning and wetlands, and making them full-time. Why? Because we want them out on in the field doing inspections. It's hard for them to get out there. This provides more service to the town and more revenue to the town. So at the end of the day, that's it's not even one full-time position. Fiscal 26 headcount. So remember last year I had proposed cutting the headcount by 6, but I was adding 2 positions, and one of them was a position for somebody to go out, a grants coordinator. And normally I get very upset, not upset, but I get a little frustrated with my colleagues when they say no to me. But I'm glad they said no on this one last year, because we're going to go to a different way of looking at funding positions whenever and wherever possible. So instead of adding a headcount for a grants coordinator, I reached out and spoke with other towns and looked into it. We're going to put in for a consultant. And so at the end of we can look at the end of the year and see if we paid A, what did they produce? If it's not a lot, if we paid $80,000 or $60,000, you can see and measure what they brought in. It does not add any fringe benefits, any retirement, no headcount at all. And the first selectmen and mayors that I've spoken to, and there's even some over in New York, very happy with that arrangement. So wherever and whenever we can, I think this is probably the way of the future, and we'll see. It's very important, I believe, to have this position because there's so many grants out there, and we don't hit them all. And Tyler Fairburn, who is in our community development office, that's not his job. His job is really community block grant stuff, and I send stuff up over to him weekly, and he adds it on top of his workload, never complains. It's a lot of work, and just coming into work, 6 months ago, I heard on, I think it was WINS radio, about a program, a federal grant that I never knew about, no one ever heard about. So having somebody there looking, watching out for us, for the residents, for the taxpayers, I think will be huge. And we'll see, and we'll be able to judge next year whether it worked or not. So hopefully that will pass. But we want to continue to be really observant and respectful of the BET's guidelines when it comes to headcount. Summary. So if you look there, the town just went over just a little bit, $245,000. The next line, Dr. Jones will get to. Capital tax levy stayed the same. So ultimately, it was a $2.7 million difference. And if you go, the guidelines here, use of fund balance, 0. Basically, everything is with, the 2.7 million, as I just mentioned. The important thing there is the mill rate, which people look at. So it goes up 0.087%. Now, Greenwich, for all intents and purposes, that's the lowest in Connecticut. There is one town, I think it's Salisbury, that's a little bit lower. but they have about 5,000 people. They don't have our responsibilities. They don't have all of the services that we provide. So you live in a town, really, that does a great job, and it's thanks to our volunteers who are in this room, some who are not here watching, to our department heads, to our staff, and to you for advocating and also supporting these budgets. But at the end of the day, we are a town that has almost 30% of our population that fits into the ALICE category, which is asset limited, income constrained, and employed, meaning they work, but they don't make that much money. That's almost a third. Think about that. So we want to make sure that they're able to live here too. And I don't know if it's like 25% of the kids in public school are on free and reduced lunch. So we have to make sure that we remember that. But also, we want to move the ball forward on projects that are good for the community and that the community wants, And so that's why the administration continues to look at public-private partnerships. We'll continue to do that wherever and whenever and wherever possible. And we thank all of those great partners in the community, whether they're people or foundations who have come forward to help us. And you heard about a few tonight. So the summary, the operating budget is services for our community. Long-range capital budget, getting projects done that are important to the community. And the mill rate recognizes the impact of property taxes on all our residents. And we just do an example there every year. Taxpayer with a $1 million assessed home value will see a $550 increase in your property taxes. And that's it. Again, thank you so much for being here tonight. Enjoy the rest of your night, and God bless.
Thank you, Fred. We look forward to visiting with you and our new town administrator, Kate Bush, next Tuesday, February 4th, and at other February department meetings. Now, we're going to welcome Karen Hirsch, our Chair of Board of Education, and then she will introduce Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Tony Jones, to present the fiscal year 2026 Board of Education schools operating and capital budgets. So welcome, Karen and Tony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the BET Budget Committee. Appreciate the time this evening. Thank you to our first selectman for the lovely presentation beforehand. I just really wanted to say good evening and thank you all for joining us tonight. I am pleased to present to you the Board of Education's proposed budget for fiscal year 2026. This budget represents countless hours of hard work, thoughtful deliberation, and a steadfast commitment to our students, schools, and community. The Board of Ed believes it strikes the right balance between addressing the needs of our students and schools and the impact upon taxpayers. As you will see, the board has continued to prioritize investments aligned with our strategic and curriculum management plans, and we're already seeing the positive impact of this work, from higher overall growth and achievement scores to many of our schools and students earning state and national awards. There's so much to celebrate about the progress being seen at the Greenwich Public Schools. And while I could spend all evening highlighting our many achievements, I'm excited to turn the presentation now over to Superintendent Dr. Jones, who's going to provide a deeper dive into the details of this year's coming budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hirsch. And I would be remiss if I didn't start by thanking Ben Branyan and Patrick Lai, who are in the back. So thank you so much for all the work that you've put in on this budget this year. I'm delighted to be here tonight. I'm going to just mention one thing the first selectman talked about, and it is the budget process. It is a 12-month process. And for the schools, the most difficult time is the summer. You close out the current year budget, and then you begin on July 1, the next school year's budget, and then you're building the budget for the year after. And that does go on all year long. If you look at the overview of this budget, it does a couple of things. It keeps us on track with our curriculum management plan, which is very important. It addresses two distinct structural budget gaps, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. It meets all of our legal mandates, continues implementation of our special education action plan, and I know the BET knows how important that is and helped us do our study for that. It also meets all of our contractual obligations. In preparing for the budget, we look at our academic needs and our strategic plan, which is, again, it's new for the district, very, very important work. We review our previous and our current budgets. We analyze our enrollment projection data. We get brand new data every October. We also look at any staffing adjustments that will need to be made. We look at all of our fixed costs, and we gather local, state, and federal funding information. And probably this red piece is one area that's really important. We do start with a zero base, and then we work our way back up. And that's a question we get every year. Why don't you just zero out and go in and make sure that everything is really relevant that's in the budget? That is exactly what we do. I want to start tonight with a little bit of achievement and strategic metrics and celebrating success, because that's what we're all about. We're about children and success and student achievement. And when you look at our strategic plan, the board worked really hard to create a plan that's very simplistic to understand, but very well defined in the work that we need to do. And it's focused on mastery of reading, mastery of math, science, our graduation rate, and then we have 3 different survey areas. We gather information from our students, our staff, and also our families. When you look at English language arts, and I just have a few slides on each one of these areas, we're very proud of the DIBELS work that we're doing this year in our early childhood, very focused on the science of reading. We do want to note that in grade 4, we have the #1 ranked school in Connecticut. Grade 5 in ELA, we have the #3 ranked school in Connecticut. Our growth rate in grades 4 through 8 is ranked the 8th district in Connecticut, and you need to think about all those districts that have a very different demographic than we have in Greenwich. And our students that are high needs in our high school have seen our scores grow by more than 10%, and the growth itself was 5%. And high needs includes EL students, special education students, and also the students who are on free and reduced. And specifically, because I mentioned our special education action plan, in grades 3 through 5, our proficiency is up 7%, and that's the blue and the green on the top. And where we want to see go down and we want to drop is that level 1 proficiency. We have dropped 7%. That's exactly what we want to see. When you look at our ALP and you look at our advanced learner program, you'll notice that in 2022, which is that left column over, we had a little bit of green, a little bit of blue, but the last 2 years, we've been perfect as far as our proficiency. Every single student was a level 4. And again, that means we're challenging all students to the highest maximum ability. When you look at our SAT in high school, again, looking at the ELA students with high needs, we're up 6%. This is just a chart. We call it the DIRG A, DIRG B. That's your district reference group. So these are groups who have like demographics. And you'll notice Greenwich is a B right there in the middle. And if you go over a column or two, you'll see, for instance, the EL numbers. We are at 5.5%. If you compare that to the very first line in New Canaan, they are at 0.8%. Very different demographic. And you see it again when you go over one more to the free and reduced. New Canaan does not have enough students to register. We were at 19.5% when we were building this. In mathematics, we've continued to see success district-wide. We are at an all-time aggregate achievement in grades 3 through 8. We are up an average of 10 points in our elementary, and 6 through 8, we are up an average of 6 points. Again, our special education action plan is working. Very, very impressive when you look at what we're doing in math and elementary. Proficiency is up 13%, and level 1 has dropped 16%. And again, this is just since 2021, and that is exactly what we want to see. We're investing our dollars in the right place. Again, when you look at the math achievement data and you're looking at comparing us to other districts, it doesn't really matter where we fall. We're still right in there with DIRG A and DIRG B. We are performing extremely well with districts that have a very different demographic. When we look at science, we have continued success district-wide, growth and achievement for special ed, our ELL, and we are also up 7% in achievement, and in the high school, they've already surpassed the 2028 target that we set. And this is kind of speaks for itself. You're looking at elementary, middle, and high school. Again, doing exactly what we wanted to see happen. And in science, not only are we leading in the region over Durg A and Durg B, but what you'll notice is the growth is outstanding. We also outperformed New Canaan, Westport, Darien, Trumbull, Fairfield. Very impressive. So congratulations to our teachers and our administrators and all the hard work they're doing. I'm going to show one survey point because this is the one that we're probably the most proud about, and this is our family and community engagement. And our families love their neighborhood schools. They love our schools. And when you look at in 2019, 2020, we had a 67% satisfactory rating. We then went to 80, 77, 87. Last year was the highest we've seen. 89% of our families are telling us that they love our schools and they are happy. And around this, what you're seeing it's how we measure that. Parents are generally happy with their child. They feel welcome at the school. There's mutual sense of respect and cooperation. They feel well-informed about issues and activities that are important to our school community. And they know how to reach out if their child needs help. And that's one we've really worked hard on as well, enhancing our website, workshops for parents, just a number of different outreach opportunities. Now we'll look a little bit at enrollment. We are at 8,513 students right now. And people always like to look at this. This goes back 62 years of enrollment. And what you'll notice is we're nowhere near the high, we're nowhere near the low. Our current is over on that far right-hand side. And if you go for a 20-year look back, what you'll see is we're relatively flat. We're not seeing those huge swings in one direction or the other. Our largest number was 11,000, just over 11,000 students, goes back to 1970, 54 years ago. When we look going forward, you'll see again, our projection is we're going to stay relatively flat. And what we expect to happen by our projections is that elementary will slightly go back up again, and you'll see a slide on that. High school will slightly go down. We have some larger graduating classes of 700. Now they're 650 or 640. But again, as a system, relatively flat, we expect over the next 10 years. When you look at our projections, again, this is a very impressive projection. Our projections are accurate. They're done by Dr. Prouda. And if you look at our projection at 98.3%, it doesn't get much better. And to put that in perspective, if you look at that line for high school, our projection was off by 29 students. So in a high school class of 650 students, to be off by 7, that's pretty accurate. It doesn't get much better. When you look at our enrollment, our birth rate and enrollment, what you're seeing in the blue bar, those are all the children who have been born in Greenwich. And you can see the next 3 years because we know they're here. We know who they are. So that is the birth rate. And then the orange line is what we call in-migration. So those are the families that are choosing to move to Greenwich after their children are born, or maybe they were born in another part of Connecticut, but they live in Greenwich. And so we expect that trend is also going to continue, where our birth rate is going to go up naturally. So we expect our enrollment to go up naturally, but we're also going to continue to see in-migration. Our preschool growth, we talk about this every year. Preschool, as a reminder, is mandated by federal law. The last 5 years that I had this slide, we were able to talk about how it's going up. The last 2 years, it said that we have doubled our numbers. And then this year, we happened to look closely and said, well, you know what? We've actually tripled. Our pre-K program has tripled in size. And again, these are students who qualify through Child Find and have special needs, and it is required by law. Our English language learner program, luckily this year we're relatively flat. If we go back to 2020, we're up by about 103 students. When we look at students who are qualifying for free or reduced lunch benefits, right now that bar is reading 16.8. We were at 19.6%. We continue to collect forms all year long, but at this point in time, that's where we are. Our students with special needs has continued to climb, especially since we started our action plan. So what you can see is on the far left, you see preschool, you see elementary, middle school, and high school. And again, this is just since 2019, but the bulk of those students have come in the last 3 years. If you look at our special education outplacement, this is an area where we talk a lot about this every year, and we've been working really hard on how can we contain the cost for outplacement and still do what's right for families and children. So what you're seeing here is in 2022, if you go back and you look at our total special education population, about 7% of our population was in an outplacement, and that's a school outside of Greenwich Public Schools. Currently, this year in 2025, that's fallen to 2.5%. And the reason that's important is every single outplacement right now is averaging, the average is $168,000. So when we have outplacements, if we were still running at 7%, we could expect to see approximately 60 more students or $10.1 million. That's where we could have been this year, but we have a lot of people working very hard on this issue, including the Board of Ed, and supporting us as we're building programs for our children to be able to stay in the district, which is wonderful for families. It's wonderful for children to be in the same school with your siblings, but we're doing some really good work there. When we look at our FTE and we look at reductions in budget efficiencies, what you'll see on the ellipsis at the bottom, on the bottom right, that's our special education, where we have gone up by 28.9 full-time equivalent staff members. Special education is required by law. These are speech teachers, psychologists, regular teachers for special education. And again, we have to monitor our caseloads. These are required positions. But along with that, we have tried to be incredibly responsible on our general education side, where enrollment has been slightly going down. And what you see there is we have gone down 21 positions. And this is another way to look at this. And if you look at the bar on the far left, just since June of 2023, we have gone down the 21 full-time equivalent on the general education side. And we're okay with that. We were a little bit lower in an elementary, and maybe you didn't need the third grade teacher. So when somebody retired, we didn't replace that position because it wasn't needed. In our middle school and high school, where they've gone down slightly in enrollment, they have reduced FTE in middle and high school. This has been across K-12. And again, that's 21 positions. But what you're seeing is at the top, the special education is going up. So that's why you don't see huge drops in our full-time equivalent, even though the enrollment is slightly going down. If you look at our K-5 classrooms over time, we have reduced 18 classrooms, and this goes back to 2016, 2017. But just in the 6 years that I've been here, when we started slowly declining, we've lost 16 sections. And again, we are being very responsible. We make sure that if we have a classroom position, it's needed, and we utilize the guidelines that are put forward by the Board of Education. So we are going down in our general education classrooms. When we look at our budget expense, 76% of our budget is salaries. We are a people business. That's the big blue on the top of the pie chart, 76%. And behind that is our items like purchase services. And where do our dollars go for salaries? Well, 92% is right in the classroom where it should be, working with our children. Over on the right-hand side, the next largest area is custodial and maintenance at 5%. And one of the areas we're very proud about is our administration is 2.6%. That is very low for an administrative overhead cost. And again, that's very intentional. We want our dollars out in the classroom where our children are. If you look at our transportation expense, 48% of our budget is for just general GPS transportation. Then behind that, we have our special education preschool, which is the top right at 29%. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see the gray box for private school. That's 15% of the transportation budget. And generally every year I get the question, why do we provide buses for private schools? It's required by law in the state of Connecticut. So again, that's an area that is required by law. So if you look at the budget summary, this is just a graphical way to look at it. What you'll notice is those areas in green are what are really driving the increase that we are asking for this year. So we start with last year's budget on that far left, and then when you get to the right where you'll see that $201 million, That is a 4.4% increase, but it's driven by those four areas: our wages, transportation, special education, and then we have a couple of what we call new investments, like we know that we're probably going to need another pre-K mid-year. It's areas like that. And then we are at a 4.4% budget, which we're thrilled with that, but we have two areas that I mentioned earlier about a budget gap, and one of them is Title I, and the other one has to do with the ARP, which is the American Rescue Plan that was a one-time grant because of COVID. And the board made a very intentional decision last year to utilize the last bit of those funds, the very best that they could, to help the town of Greenwich in budgeting. And we used the grant money to actually zero out the curriculum line. But as you can imagine, that line must go back in the budget this school year. And then Title I is an unanticipated reduction. You'll see that $622,000. That has to do with the federal government and how the census data in Greenwich is showing that when we look at the age range of children in Greenwich, they're coming from homes where the income is actually going up. Our poverty rate in Greenwich is dropping. However, that doesn't mean that's the public schools, because they look at the children that come from all over Greenwich, that are in private school, that are in public school, and that's how they calculate if, in fact, we're going to get a certain amount of Title I grant. We still have Title I money, but it changes the grant amount. And this is looking at it in just a different viewpoint. You can see the wage increase is what's really driving this budget at $5.8 million. Transportation is $1.1 million increase. Special education is $1 million. Some of those new investments is right at $1 million. And then we have the funding we must plug back in. And again, Title I and the curriculum restoration, they're in our budget right now. We can't do without them. It's just they were in a different bucket, and they're going to have to fall in our operating budget now. And that puts that increase at $9.8 million, or 5.1%. So when we look at, again, our approved operating budget, what the Board of Ed has approved, it's $202,431,051. That is an increase just over $9.8 million, or 5.1%. But again, if you go back and you think about the Title I and you think about the curriculum reduction, it was a 4.4% increase in what we have generally in the budget this year, just different buckets. And I do want to point out, I know we talked about the guidelines, the first selectman did. The guidelines called for an increase of 2.96% for the Board of Education. That does not cover our contractual and student need costs. Again, our budget is driven primarily by federal law and contracts. And it's all the many unions that we have contracts with. And again, a 2.96% would not cover those costs. And what would it mean if we tried to meet those guidelines? The budget that we're presenting would need to decrease just over $4 million. And the way that I would couch that, we're a people business. You saw the pie chart. It's 40 to 45 positions across the district. And again, a lot of those positions, many of them are required by federal law. So it would be an incredibly difficult task to meet a 2.96% budget. And Ms. Hirsch, I believe you have some closing comments. Oh, do you want me to do the capital first? Yeah. Let me go. We have about 4 or 5 slides on capital, so I'll go ahead and finish that. First of all, I want to say thank you to the BET, all of our elected officials. This has been a wonderful fall for us when it comes to capital projects. This was the opening of the new secure entryway at Greenwich High School. We also were so excited to be opening the field at Western Middle School that was many years in the making. And again, we are so grateful to our elected officials for supporting these projects. And then what you'll see here is we also have our Central Middle School. We had the groundbreaking, and somebody was just saying they saw some trucks or something is starting to show up. And I could almost have Old Greenwich on here. They have their ground opening coming, getting the date set. So again, thank you for that. We have about 4 slides just to very briefly touch on capital. Our budget is approved in October, and as First Selectman mentioned, it's a little different process. Our CIP sheets do match the town of Greenwich now, which I know the BET appreciates. We're trying to be very thoughtful with that. We are very focused on the Board of Ed executing projects, and I know we will, on our full day, talk about this, but we do have projects that take multiple years to complete. Schools have a very short window of opportunity to do major project work because a lot of it needs to be done when children are not in school. So if we're doing a major project like HVAC, it may take us 3 or 4 years to actually complete the project. We also have a 5-year plan that is presented, and we believe it's the appropriate level of investment. So these are 5 major projects. We're not going to mention everything that's in our capital budget. We have ADA compliance for Western Middle School, and this is part of a 10-year plan to start addressing the ADA challenges across the district. Julian Curtis, as the First Selectman mentioned, cafeteria and equipment upgrades, especially in the kitchen area. Riverside Design Fund, so that once we have our ed specs completed here in the coming weeks with the Board of Ed, we'll be ready to work with the First Selectman on starting to get a building committee if this gets funded. Then Greenwich High School, we want to finish Phase 2 of the cellular project. That's a safety project at the high school. We split it over 2 years, so it would be much more palatable to fund. And then also at Greenwich High School, we have Cardinal Stadium, which is the A&E for the driveway. Everyone talks about that second egress, so there's $150,000 so that we can try to do some design work there to know exactly what we can or can't do. So our total capital request is $19.6 million. The maintenance and upkeep is $8.7 million, with the major projects totaling $10.9 million. And I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. I really just wanted to say again to the BET Budget Committee and other members, thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to present the budget to you guys tonight. Please forward any of your questions to Dr. Jones, and we will make sure to have them answered for you as quickly as possible, and look forward to sitting down with you to go further in depth into our budget on February 6th. Thank you also to the rest of the members of the BET. Certainly send your questions along, and to the RTM members who will be getting this afterwards, and to the public for being here to support our budgets. So thank you and have a nice night.
Karen, could you also, we try and coordinate all questions also through Roland Geiger. So anyone who's sending their questions to Dr. Jones on this part of the budget, if they could also copy Roland Geiger so that he tracks all that too.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So thank you. So thank you, Karen and Tony. We look forward to collaborating with you during the fiscal year 2026 budget meetings. The schools department meeting will be held on Thursday, February 6th. So before we go to our next section, which will be on the public hearing, I just want to thank our finance staff for all the work that they put in year-round on the budget. And, we have our wonderful controller here, Pete Minarski. Our budget director actually works with both the schools and the town of Greenwich in preparing the budgets, and he keeps it all a secret from the 12 BET members. He's got his own little wall there that he maintains. But we thank Roland Geiger, and also we thank Samantha Longo, who's our executive assistant to the controller, who works very closely and for which we couldn't do our work. And then Joan Lynch, who's also our deputy controller. So thank you to all of you too.